First, I think it's best to start with yourself. And I know as I've gone through my practice and I've fallen on my face many times, I've learned, like, in spite of my, I guess, desire to alienate myself from everybody because I get so annoyed with having to explain myself all the time, I figure, well, why not educate? Why not, turn it around and make it something good that maybe people can understand and maybe even cultivate their own creativity? Because we do live in a society that I feel is really allergic to art. They don't understand it, and a lot of the time everybody shuts down. Like, how many times have you been, in a thing and you've been, you decide to get brave and draw a picture and someone goes, oh, that's not, like, oh, I have no talent. I have no talent. When I was teaching in the school system, you hear that all the time. I'm not Da Vinci, and even the teachers were like, well, don't put so much pressure on her. She's not Da Vinci. And I'm like, well, that's not what I'm trying to do. Becoming an artist is a series of almost like a series of tectonic plates that build on each other, and over time you've got this nice land mass that is your practice, and it grows and it grows and it becomes this really beautiful living organic thing that you have to treat with respect. And I think people don't treat art as a living thing. They treat it as a commodity or something that can fit into how society fits into. So if you can make a lot of money at your art, you get respect. If you can put things together in a good way, then, and if you're famous, you've made it. But I think more so often than not, I remember Agnes Martin, who was a Saskatchewan artist back in the 1950s. She did these weird minimalistic paintings that nobody really understood, and they were just these black and white squares and grids, and people were like, what the hell is that? How do you relate? But one of the things that she said was that, a lot of the time, art requires, I guess, a different kind of way of getting around in the world. And she said, I'm going to keep working until I see myself in the work. And when I see myself in the work, I know I've got there. I know that I've gotten there. And she often would use the metaphor of the grid of the prairies as a starting point for her paintings. So there's a really good book of hers called Writings. I used to carry it around in my backpack all the time, and it was given to me by one of my professors. It's really awesome. So anybody who wants to read it, it's in German and English, so, anybody who reads German, I don't read German, but if anybody you know does, you can read them both. If you get bored with one, you can just switch to the other. But anyway, I guess what I'll do is I'll read a little bit of, the paper I sort of wrote when I graduated, because the one thing that art school gave me, besides a humongous debt that I will probably not pay off for a very long time. Never. That's the only thing that's really on my mind today, but is an ability to language myself in my own voice. So I highlighted some passages that I thought related to just my little informal discussion here. So I'll just read a couple of them off, and then maybe we can sort of sit and talk informally, with any comments. Hopefully I've unearthed something for people to start talking about, because I'm not really sure how to direct this. It's kind of literal and sort of, unconstructed the way I like things. So. All right. Okay, here's a couple.
Am I good here?
Yeah, you're good. Thank you. Thank you very much for holding that for me.
No problem.
Okay, so the reactions of a human being are more complex than simple reactivity and not altogether black and white. The human mind is more than a cyclonic mass being blown about without a nucleus. The human brain is aware of itself, and this is what creates consciousness in the human being to begin with. With an acute awareness of its pangs, cravings, and survival mechanisms, the brain finds ways to integrate them into reality according to the paradigm surrounding it and can shift and vary the instincts accordingly. Words and grammar are symbols for ideas, and they're meant to convey these ideas to a massive but very much assumed audience because they generalize sensation. For example, blue sky conjures up a very polished image. But what about the color of the blueness? What does it mean to see a blue sky? What about the fact that some people may not look at the sky the way I do? Words are limiting because they do not convey the complete spectrum of human experience, but rather are conformed, assumptive, narrow one. To complicate matters, the syntax of writing is a fence, and it keeps the words at bay. The words have been told not to jump the fence, and they're afraid to speculate. A writer as a whole is fenced between margins, lines, and squares of paper, and a writer functions within the boundaries of syntax, grammar, and phrases. The writer never seems to question boundaries, but what happens when they do? Through the conditioning of approval and disapproval by the authority, which I've got in quotations here, societal paradigms, inherited belief systems, the intensely emotive art maker learns it is not safe to be themselves, and so over time, gradually assumes a persona of what will be appreciated rather than acknowledging the true seething, breathing, feeling one underneath. This detachment from the self results in the complete psychological withdrawal of the art maker from his or her own species, not letting the everyday functions be necessary in order to exist among other members of the human race, but not necessarily because he or she believes in them. So it's often easy to dismiss how much this invisible honesty affects the emotive human makeup. So driven by a mixture of societal expectations and social conditioning, the brain constructs coping mechanisms, these being ways of hiding the vulnerable parts of the emotive self. Layers of these coping mechanisms create a psychological buildup, but at the core of the artist's persona lies the reality that abandonment still exists, and the hand with its otherworldly perceptions does not forget. The making of the mark provides a detour, or the making of the art, a means of working around a mountain too large to conquer. The hand's means of coping through the traced mark become an oasis in the middle of a desert, the way that the artist feels unconsciously with the abandonment that she is haunted by. The hand perception is not a physical fact, but one of faith, that its sensitivities, found in nerves and tissue, are fulfilled through the experience of touching, reaching out, in spite of its blindness. The drive to express composes the only psychic scar tissue which erupts onto the surface of the art maker's persona, and the tendency to repress one's emotive and instinctual yearnings is learned from birth and internalized, often without realization. In North American society, the response to human emotion is unnatural and abusive. Allowing one's emotions to surface can often bring on judgment or ridicule. So what does a person do when their anger overpowers them or their sadness moves them to feel vulnerable in a culture or an environment which does not appreciate it? How can a person be fully complete with all their drives and feelings when they are driven to stay quiet? The answer is in making art. The point is, by making art, the artist defeats emotional death, which may have occurred because of the societal paradigms which she must be part of. In light of this acknowledgement, the process of making art is a quietly defiant yet optimistic one. It is saying as a whole that in spite of all these repressive tendencies around us, a person capable of great emotional intensity can safely exist as a functional human being. At the same time, she can function within the social borders which do not support her makeup. Her true belief system, one based on the freedom of expression and otherworldly language, finds safe and non-judgmental shelter through the making of her art. So that's just a little bit of what I wrote